Have you ever stood by a river and watched the water flow? You can never step into the same river twice, the ancient philosopher said. The water you touched a moment ago has already moved downstream, replaced by new water, yet we still call it the same river. Now, imagine if I told you that you are like that river. The person you were yesterday is not the person you are today. And the question that has haunted humanity since the dawn of consciousness remains: if this body dies, where does the mind go? Today, we're diving deep into one of Buddhism's most profound teachings, a question that connects us all, regardless of where we come from or what we believe. This isn't just ancient philosophy locked away in dusty scrolls. This is about understanding the very nature of who you are right now, in this present moment, and what happens when this physical form we call me comes to its natural end. Stay with me, because what you're about to discover might completely change how you see yourself, your choices, and the preciousness of this very moment. Part 1: The Zen Master and the Burning House. A simple Zen story, the nature of self. Let me share with you a story that happened many centuries ago in ancient China. There was once a Zen master named Huineng who lived in a modest temple on the edge of a village. One autumn evening, as golden leaves danced in the courtyard and the smell of incense drifted through the meditation hall, a distraught young scholar came running to him. The scholar's robes were disheveled, his eyes red from crying. "Master," he gasped, catching his breath, "my family's house burned down last night. Everything I knew, everything I was, is gone. My childhood room where I studied, my mother's garden, and the gate my father built with his own hands. Who am I now without all of that? Where has that person gone?" The master looked at him with gentle eyes and said nothing at first. He simply walked to a nearby pond where lotus flowers floated serenely on the surface. He picked up a small stone and tossed it into the water. Ripples spread outward in perfect circles, each one giving rise to the next, expanding, changing, then fading into stillness. "Tell me," the master asked, "where did the first ripple go?" The scholar stared at the water, confused. It didn't go anywhere, master. It changed. It became the second ripple, which became the third, which became." "Yes," Huineng smiled. "And where were you before the house? And where will you be after? You are not the house. You are not even the same person who lived in that house. You are the ripples, always flowing, always changing. What you call you is a continuous process, not a fixed thing." The scholar's eyes widened as understanding began to dawn. "But master," he pressed on, "if I am always changing, always flowing like these ripples, what happens when this body dies? Where do I go?" The Zen master sat down on a smooth rock by the water's edge and invited the scholar to sit beside him. "Let me tell you something that the Buddha realized under the Bodhi tree. There is no fixed you that goes anywhere. There never was. The Buddhist teaching, no fixed self." This ancient story carries one of Buddhism's most liberating yet challenging truths, the doctrine of Anatta, or no self. When we ask, where does the mind go when the body dies, we're already making an assumption that might not be true. We're assuming there's a permanent, unchanging self or soul that needs to go somewhere. But Buddhist wisdom sees it differently. Look at your own experience right now. Are you the same person you were 10 years ago? You might have the same name, carry the same memories, but are your thoughts the same? Your beliefs? Your body? Science tells us that most cells in our body replace themselves every 7 to 10 years. The atoms that make up you were once part of stars, plants, and other beings. What we call self is more like a symphony than a single note. It's a flowing process made up of 5 aggregates, which Buddhism calls the khandhas: physical form, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness. Each one is constantly arising and passing away, like waves on an ocean, like frames in a movie reel, moving so fast we perceive continuous motion. Think about it. Your thoughts right now, where did they come from? They arose from causes and conditions, your past experiences, what you ate today, what you saw, and what you heard. And where do they go? They cease, only to give rise to new thoughts. This is the nature of all existence, impermanent, constantly flowing, never static. If this teaching is resonating with you, if you're finding value in these ancient wisdom teachings brought to life, please take a moment to subscribe to Buddha Coha. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss our weekly journeys into Buddhist wisdom and healing. Your support helps us continue sharing these transformative teachings with souls around the world who are seeking peace and understanding. Part 2: The Wheel of Intention. The story of the 2 merchants. Now, you might be thinking, if there's no permanent self, why does it matter what I do? If I'm just ripples that will fade away, why bother living ethically or mindfully? This is where another beautiful teaching comes in. Let me tell you another story, this one from the time of the Buddha himself. 2 merchants once set out from the same village on the same day, both heading to a distant city to sell their wares. The first merchant, whose name was Sumana, treated his employees with kindness, paid fair wages, and gave water to travelers he met along the dusty road. When he saw an injured bird by the roadside, he stopped, despite losing time, to help it. The second merchant, Devdatta, was different. He drove his workers harshly, shortchanged his customers when he could, and once even kicked a beggar who asked for help. I must reach the city quickly, he thought. I have no time for such distractions. Both merchants reached the city. Both sold their goods. Both eventually died, as all beings must. But here's what the Buddha taught about their journeys: every action, every intention, created ripples that didn't simply disappear. Sumana's kindness had created a web of wholesome causes. The employees he treated well spoke highly of him, bringing more business. The travelers he helped remembered his kindness and directed others to him. Even the bird he saved, in some small way, was part of a universe that had been slightly improved by his presence. His mind, at the moment of death, was peaceful, reflecting on a life of meaning. Devdatta's harshness had created different ripples. His employees resented him, his reputation suffered, and his final moments were filled with regret and fear. The world he had created through his intentions was one of suffering, for others and ultimately for himself. Understanding Kamma, the law of intention. This is Kamma, sometimes spelled karma in Sanskrit. But here's what's crucial to understand: Kamma is not some cosmic scorekeeper in the sky, judging and punishing. Kamma, in its purest sense, is intention. It's the mental state behind your actions, the quality of heart you bring to each moment. The Buddha said, "Intention, I tell you, is Kamma. For having intended, one acts by body, speech, or mind." Think of Kamma like planting seeds. If you plant mango seeds, you'll get mango trees, not apple trees. If you plant seeds of kindness, patience, and wisdom, you'll harvest peace, both in this life and in the continuity of consciousness that follows. If you plant seeds of hatred, greed, and delusion, you'll harvest suffering. But here's where it gets profound. Kamma is what creates continuity without requiring a permanent self to travel from life to life. Imagine a candle lighting another candle. The flame on the second candle is not the same as the first, yet there's a clear causal connection. Neither is it completely different. This is how consciousness continues after death, according to Buddhist teaching. Your intentions, your kamma, create conditions. These conditions don't need a permanent you to carry them. They exist as patterns in the universe, as potentials seeking fulfillment, like a seed containing the potential for a tree. Living with karmic wisdom. So what does this mean for your life right now, today? It means every single moment is pregnant with possibility. Every thought you think, every word you speak, every action you take is planting seeds. You are, in every moment, creating your future. This isn't about fear or guilt. It's about empowerment. You're not a victim of fate. You're not predestined by some cosmic plan you can't control. You are, right now, shaping what comes next through the quality of your intentions. When you're stuck in traffic and feel anger rising, that's a moment of choice. When someone criticizes you and you feel the urge to lash out, that's a moment of choice. When you see someone struggling and wonder whether to help, that's a moment of choice. Each choice plants seeds. And those seeds will sprout, if not today, then tomorrow, or in circumstances yet to come. Part 3, The Moment of Death. The Buddha's teaching on the final moment. Now we come to perhaps the most mysterious part of our journey. What actually happens at the moment of death? The Buddha, who claimed to remember his past lives and to see the death and rebirth of countless beings, taught about this with remarkable detail. There's a beautiful and somewhat poetic teaching in the Theravada Buddhist tradition about the dying process. As death approaches, the mind gradually withdraws from the senses. First, the body loses its strength. Then, the ability to feel warmth fades. Vision dims. Hearing becomes distant, like sounds underwater. Touch, taste, smell, each sense gate closes, one by one. In these final moments, the mind doesn't go blank. Instead, it becomes extraordinarily vivid. Past kamma, the intentions and actions of a lifetime, present themselves. This isn't some external judge showing you a highlight reel. It's more like the natural culmination of all the mental patterns you've created throughout your life coming to fruition. The teachings describe 3 types of signs that may appear. Kamma, the actual recollection of significant actions you performed, moments where your intentions were particularly strong, for good or ill. Kamma nimitta, symbolic signs related to those actions. A person who lived generously might see images of abundance, flowing water, and open hands. Someone who lived in anger might see fire, weapons, and closed fists. Gati nimitta, signs of the realm where consciousness will arise. Lights, sounds, and visions that indicate the direction of the next birth. The story of King Duttagamunu. Let me share a powerful story from ancient Sri Lanka that illustrates this teaching. King Duttagamunu was a Buddhist king who unified Sri Lanka in the 2nd century BCE. He was a great supporter of Buddhism, building magnificent temples and stupas. But he had also fought many battles, and many lives were lost in his campaigns. As he lay on his deathbed, surrounded by monks, he became agitated. The monks asked what troubled him. "I am afraid," the king confessed. "I have killed so many in battle. What will become of my consciousness?" The elder monk present, Venerable Therapetabea, understood. "Great king," he said gently, "think not of the battles, but of your intention. Did you fight for personal gain, for hatred, for the joy of conquest?" "No," the king replied. "I fought to protect the Dhamma, to create peace, to end tyranny." "And after the battles, what did you do?" "I built temples. I supported the Sangha. I established hospitals and distributed food to the poor." The monk nodded. "Then your wholesome Kamma far outweighs the unwholesome actions performed in times of necessity. Let your mind rest in your good intentions." As the king's consciousness began to withdraw, he saw visions of the temples he'd built, heard the chanting of monks, felt the gratitude of people he'd helped. His final moment was one of peace, and according to the chronicles, he was reborn in a heavenly realm. The immediate arising of new consciousness. Here's where Buddhist teaching gets technically precise in a way that's quite remarkable. In classical Theravada Buddhism, there is no gap, no waiting period between death and the arising of new consciousness. The very moment the death consciousness ceases, a new birth consciousness arises. It's instantaneous, like one moment of ripples giving rise to the next. This new consciousness is not the same as the old consciousness. It's not you being reborn in the sense of a soul jumping from one body to another, like a person changing houses. Rather, it's causally connected, like the second flame lit from the first candle. The Pali term is paticcasamuppada, dependent origination. Each moment of consciousness arises dependent on conditions, causes, and Kamma from the previous moments. There's a beautiful metaphor the Buddha used. It's like a mango fruit falling from a tree. The fruit doesn't contain a tiny tree inside it that grows. But the conditions in the fruit, the seed, the nutrients, when they meet the right circumstances in soil, give rise to a new tree. The new tree is not the old tree, but there's a clear causal relationship. These teachings can be challenging to grasp because they're so different from what many of us were taught. But they're also incredibly liberating. If you're finding value in this exploration, consider sharing this video with someone who might benefit from these teachings. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Buddha Coha for more deep dives into Buddhist wisdom that heals and transforms. Part 4, The Intermediate State Debate. Different maps for the same territory. Now, here's where Buddhist tradition gets interesting. While all schools of Buddhism agree on the core teachings, there are different perspectives on what, if anything, happens between death and rebirth. The classical Theravada position, based on the Abhidhamma, the Buddhist psychological and philosophical texts, maintains that rebirth is instantaneous. Death consciousness and birth consciousness are like two ends of a seesaw. As one goes down, the other comes up. No gap, no intermediate state. But Tibetan Buddhism, drawing from different texts and tantric traditions, describes something called the Bardo, an intermediate state that can last up to 49 days. During this time, the consciousness experiences vivid visions, encounters with peaceful and wrathful deities, and gradually moves toward a new birth unless liberation is achieved. The Tibetan Book of the Dead. There's a famous text called the Bardo Thodol, which translates to liberation through hearing in the intermediate state, but is commonly known as the Tibetan Book of the Dead. It's essentially a guidebook, meant to be read to a dying or recently deceased person, helping them navigate the experiences of the Bardo. The text describes how, immediately after death, there's a moment called the clear light, the nature of mind itself, unobscured and luminous. If you can recognize this and rest in it, liberation is instant. But most people, confused by the suddenness of death, don't recognize it. Then come visions. First, peaceful deities, representing the wholesome aspects of the mind. Then, wrathful deities, representing the unwholesome aspects. But here's the key teaching: these are not external beings judging you. They are manifestations of your own mind, your own Kamma, appearing in symbolic forms. A person who lives with anger might see terrifying, wrathful beings and not recognize them as their own anger manifesting. They flee in fear, and that fear-driven energy propels them toward rebirth in realms of suffering. But someone with wisdom might see these same visions and think, "Ah, this is just my mind. These are empty appearances, like dreams." That recognition can lead to liberation or at least a favorable rebirth. Are these contradictions? So which is right? Is rebirth instantaneous, or is there a Bardo? This is where we need to understand something important about Buddhist teachings. They're not trying to give you an objective, scientific map of reality. They're giving you tools for liberation. Think of it like maps of a city. A road map looks different from a subway map, which looks different from a topographical map. But they're all describing the same city, just emphasizing different aspects for different purposes. The Theravada teaching emphasizes the impersonal nature of the process. There's no you waiting in some intermediate realm. It's purely cause and effect, Kamma and result, immediate and natural as cause following effect. The Tibetan teaching emphasizes the experiential, subjective journey of consciousness. It provides a framework for practitioners to work with during their lives and at the moment of death. The 49 days might be how the dying person's mind experiences time, even if, from an external perspective, rebirth happens instantaneously. Both teachings share the essential insight: there is no permanent soul or self transmigrating. Both emphasize that Kamma, your intentions and actions, shape what happens. Both point toward liberation as the ultimate goal. The practical wisdom in both approaches. What matters more than resolving which interpretation is correct is understanding what these teachings are trying to convey. You are responsible for your mind, your intentions, and your actions. Death is not the end of cause and effect. And you have the power, right now, to create conditions for a better future, whether that future is in this life or beyond. The Theravada teaching reminds us, don't procrastinate. Don't think you have endless time. Each moment matters because each moment immediately becomes the next moment. Plant good seeds now. The Tibetan teaching reminds us, familiarize yourself with your mind now, while you're alive and have the clarity to do so. Practice recognizing the nature of your thoughts and emotions as they arise. Then, when death comes, you'll have the mental training to navigate whatever experience unfolds. Part 5, Shaping Your Destiny. The Parable of the Three Potters. Let me close with one more story, a teaching parable that brings everything together. 3 potters worked in the same village. Each sat at their wheel, shaping clay into vessels. The first potter worked carelessly. He didn't center his clay properly and didn't pay attention to the consistency of his work. "Whatever happens, happens," he said. "Fate will decide if my pots are good or not." His pots were lopsided, weak, and unsellable. He blamed fate for his misfortune. The second potter worked diligently but with anxiety. Every imperfection sent him into worry. I must make perfect pots, he stressed. My whole future depends on it. He worked long hours, barely sleeping, fearing that any mistake would ruin his destiny. His pots were decent, but his life was miserable. The third potter worked mindfully. She centered her clay with care, felt the shape emerging beneath her hands, adjusted when needed, accepted when a pot cracked, and simply started again. I shape my pots with my hands, my attention, and my intention, she said. I cannot control if they sell or break, but I can control the quality of presence I bring to this moment. Her pots were beautiful because they were made with presence, and her life was peaceful because she understood her role in the creative process. You are the potter of your life. This is the Buddhist teaching on personal agency and Kamma in a nutshell. You are not a victim of predetermined fate. The future is not written in some cosmic book. But neither are you the all-powerful controller of every outcome. You are the potter. You have agency over your intentions, your actions, and your mental habits. These are the hands shaping the clay. But you don't control every factor: the quality of clay you're given, your circumstances, the heat of the kiln, life's unexpected events, or whether someone will buy your pot, the responses of others. What you do control, and what matters most from a Buddhist perspective, is the quality of heart and mind you bring to each moment. Are you working with mindfulness or carelessness? With kindness or cruelty? With wisdom or delusion? The 5 practices for positive Kamma. The Buddha taught specific practices for creating wholesome Kamma that will benefit you in this life, at death, and in future existences. 1. Ethical conduct, sila, living by precepts that prevent harm. Not killing, not stealing, not lying, not engaging in sexual misconduct, not taking intoxicants that cloud the mind. This isn't about rigid morality, it's about creating conditions for peace. 2. Generosity, dana, giving freely without expecting return. This plants seeds of abundance, break the pattern of clinging and fear of lack. 3. Loving kindness, metta, deliberately cultivating goodwill toward yourself and others. Even in difficult situations, train the mind to default to kindness rather than hostility. 4. Mindfulness, sati, paying attention to the present moment without judgment. This is how you actually see the arising and passing of thoughts, feelings, and sensations. This is how you recognize the impermanent nature of the self. 5. Wisdom, panna, understanding the true nature of reality, impermanence, suffering, and non-self. This is the ultimate liberation because wisdom cuts through delusion at its root. When you practice these 5, you're not just preparing for a good death or a favorable rebirth. You're fundamentally transforming the quality of your consciousness right now. You're creating a mind that is more peaceful, more resilient, more awake. The ultimate freedom, nibbana. And here's the beautiful culmination of all Buddhist teaching: you don't have to keep riding the wheel of death and rebirth forever. The whole point of understanding Kamma, death, and rebirth is not to ensure you get a good seat on the carousel. It's time to step off the carousel entirely. This is nibbana, often translated as nirvana, the cessation of suffering. It's the realization so complete that no new Kamma is created because the delusion of self has been seen through. When there's no sense of a separate self grasping and clinging, there's nothing to propel consciousness forward into another birth. But you don't have to wait for some future lifetime to taste this freedom. Every moment of letting go, every moment of seeing through the illusion of separation, every moment of resting in the present without grasping, is a taste of Nibbana. It's available now, in this very breath, in this very moment of reading or listening. So, where does the mind go when the body dies? Perhaps now you see that the question itself was based on a misunderstanding. There is no fixed mind, no permanent you that goes anywhere. There is only the continuous flow of consciousness, arising and passing away, shaped by intentions and actions, continuing according to natural laws of cause and effect. But that doesn't make life meaningless. It makes it precious. It makes every single moment an opportunity. You are not a helpless leaf blown by the winds of fate. You are the intention behind the action. You are the quality of presence you bring to this moment. And that shapes everything. The Buddha's final words to his disciples were, "All conditioned things are impermanent. Work out your liberation with diligence. Not with fear. Not with death anxiety. But with diligence, with care, with attention to this precious human life you have right now. So, live kindly. Act with integrity. Speak truthfully. Give generously. Cultivate awareness. These aren't just nice ideals. They're the very seeds that create your future, in this life and beyond. And remember, you don't have to figure it all out right now. The path unfolds one step at a time. Start where you are. Start with this breath. Start with the next kind word, the next conscious choice, the next moment of presence. Thank you for taking this journey with me today. If these teachings touched your heart, please subscribe to Buddha Coha and turn on notifications. Share this video with someone who might find peace in these ancient truths. And leave a comment below. What's one intention you want to plant today that will create positive ripples in your life? May you walk in peace. May your intentions be wholesome. And may you realize the liberation that is your birthright. Until next time, breathe deeply, live mindfully, and remember, each moment is a new beginning. As a lotus flower is born in water, grows in water, and rises out of water to stand above it unsoiled, so I, born in the world, raised in the world, having overcome the world, live unsoiled by the world. The Buddha.